Welcome back, Grade 12 SISC students, to today's Explanator. My colleague and I are thrilled to step into our roles as your resident macroeconomists to guide you through a truly definitive masterclass. Today, we're setting aside all the introductory noise. We are here to derive the absolute apex metric of economic health, net national product at factor cost. By the end of this session, you're going to understand exactly why this specific aggregate is the ultimate unrivaled measure of a nation's true economic performance.
Okay, let's dive right into our rigorous roadmap for today. First, we'll be defining national income. Second, deriving domestic factor income. Third, exploring the role of NFEIA. Fourth, we'll neutralize indirect tax distortions. And finally, we'll apply this to international economic comparisons.
Section 1. Defining national income, the apex macroeconomic metric.
Now, listen closely, because absolute precision is required here. Net national product at factor cost, which by the way is completely synonymous with national income, is defined as the factor income accruing to the normal residents of a country during a year after making an allowance for depreciation. Notice that strict syllabus terminology we're using. We aren't just looking at geographical borders, we are specifically looking at normal residents. And crucially, to make this a net product, we absolutely must make a strict allowance for depreciation. That's the literal wear and tear on our economy's capital stock over the year.
Moving right along to Section 2, deriving domestic factor income, the mathematical deduction.
So you might be wondering, how do we mathematically deduce this exact, pristine metric from the much broader gross aggregates you constantly see in the headlines? Well, it's a logical progression. Step 1. We start with gross national product at factor cost. This includes the sum total of earnings received by various factors of production by normal residents, but it still includes the consumption of fixed capital. Step 2. We must rigorously deduct that allowance for depreciation. In the process of production, plants and equipment wear out, right? We simply cannot count that consumed capital as true income. By systematically stripping away that depreciation, we arrive at Step 3, our target metric, net national product at factor cost. Remember, net is only ever achieved by acknowledging and removing this capital consumption.
But there's actually another brilliant way to construct this. Net national product at factor cost equals domestic factor income plus net factor income earned from abroad. This beautifully illustrates that national income is a composite of two distinct income streams. We're taking everything generated within our domestic territory and adjusting it by the net flows of factor incomes crossing our borders.
Which brings us perfectly to Section 3, the role of NFIA and the national versus domestic variance. Notice how elegantly these two potential states of a globalized economy contrast with each other. Consider the first scenario. If net factor income from abroad is positive, meaning our normal residents are earning more from the rest of the world than non-residents are earning within our borders, our national income becomes strictly larger than our domestic income. Now, flip that scenario. If NFIA is negative, the exact reverse is true. Our national income will be strictly less than our domestic income. The flow of factor income from the rest of the world entirely dictates where national income sits relative to domestic income.
Section 4. Neutralizing indirect tax distortions to protect true production value.
I really want you to think about the destructive distortions of everyday market pricing for a second. Why is net national product at market price fundamentally flawed if our goal is to evaluate true underlying economic production? Honestly, why can't we just look at the price tags on the store shelves?
The crucial point here is what my colleague and I like to call the market price illusion. The prices you and I pay as consumers are very different from the prices that the producing firms actually get to keep. Why? Because market prices are inclusive of indirect taxes. These taxes heavily inflate the market price, but, and this is absolutely vital to grasp, these taxes are not a part of factor earnings. Therefore, gross aggregates measured at market price can artificially rise simply because the government decided to increase indirect taxes even if actual physical production hasn't increased by a single unit. NNP at factor cost strips out these net indirect taxes, entirely removing this dangerous distortion.
Let's prove this thesis with a hypothetical scenario. Imagine two economies, Nation A and Nation B. Both have an identical actual production value at factor cost, $1,000. They produce the exact same amount of real economic value. However, Nation B decides to impose a massive $250 in indirect taxes, compared to Nation A's $50. If you were an amateur and only looked at the apparent market price, Nation B appears significantly wealthier at $1,250. But as elite macroeconomists, we know better. NNP at factor cost pierces right through that illusion and correctly proves their actual net production is absolutely identical.
0. That is exactly how much NNP at factor cost is affected by changes in government indirect taxation. When taxes rise, market price aggregates swell with empty inflation. But factor cost aggregates, zero effect. This absolute mathematical insulation is exactly what makes NNP at factor cost a pure metric of actual production.
Finally, Section 5, International Economic Comparisons, the Apex Indicator.
As macroeconomists, my colleague and I simply cannot compare nations using market prices because global tax regimes vary wildly from country to country. It's chaos. NNP at factor cost is the apex indicator for the global stage because it is completely insulated from these disparate national tax policies. It exclusively measures net production and exact factor payments. We're talking wages, rent, interest, and profit. By doing so, it allows for a true apples-to-apples global assessment, successfully eradicating any false growth driven by tax hikes or market price inflation.
To really solidify this masterclass, let's turn directly to your syllabus material. National income is the best indicator for making international comparisons of relative income levels. I highly suggest you commit this to memory. This isn't just our theoretical preference, it is the ultimate, examiner-approved takeaway for identifying the true comparative health of global economies. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you, the truly focused learner, with a provocative, theoretical question. If net national product at factor cost perfectly reveals the absolute truth of our net production, what happens to our actual standard of living, our economic welfare, if a country's population growth drastically outpaces this true income? How do we bridge that massive gap between national production and individual prosperity? Well, I'll let you ponder that leap toward per capita real income on your own. Keep studying, keep questioning the numbers, and we'll see you in the next explainer.